that a Lakers jersey on Christian's chair?
I don't know.
Was that from the bet? Didn't he have a bet with Mayor Gary?
I don't know.
We are live on YouTube. Live on YouTube. One minute to Shaw. Thirty seconds to Shaw.
I have a copy. Yeah.
So you did this?
No, that's right. We're good.
We are live on Shaw.
Did you say we're live, Madam Clerk? Did you say we're live?
Correct, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we are live on Shaw.
Very good. So before we get this meeting started, I think I probably have to explain for those who would be wondering why I am wearing a Lake Superior State hockey jersey. If you might, some of you might recall, I think we really have, I guess, the play of the U.S. junior team to blame for this, along with Dan Gray at Sioux Online. I'm not sure if Dan started it or our friend Mayor Don Gary across the bridge started it, but I was asked if I would be willing to do a wager on the World Junior Game where Canada played the U.S. And of course, I was happy to do that because I believe strongly in our team. In any event, I was not the winner of that wager. The wager was that whoever lost would have to wear either, in our case, Mayor Gary would have had to wear a Greyhounds jersey to his commissioners meeting. And in this case, with the United States winning, I had to wear a Lake Superior State jersey to our council meeting. So here we are. I'm wearing it. I'm making good on the bet. Mayor Gary, congratulations. And Dan, I'm going to ignore all of your social media entreaties where you're trying to get me to bet on things in the future. Anyway, Madam Clerk, with that noted, we can start the meeting.
Under agenda item 1, adoption of minutes, I have a motion by councillors Dufour and Bruni, resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of February 8, 2021 be approved.
All in favor? Carried.
And under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict with respect to agenda item 6.8, lane assumption, closing and conveyance in the Eldridge subdivision, as the applicant is a client of the law firm, and that's the only declaration that I have.
Okay, so council, no other conflicts of interest to announce? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, we can move on.
Got a motion by councillors Zezo, Allen, and Bruni, resolved that the agenda for February 22, 2021 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And under agenda item 5, proclamations and delegations, agenda item 5.1, the Ontario Finnish Rest Home 50th anniversary.
Okay, so I have a proclamation here. I'd like to thank the Ontario Finnish Rest Home Association for their great work in our community. They certainly do a really good job of caring for the people in their care and residing at the complexes. So we're happy to mark their 50th anniversary. Whereas 2021 marks the 50th anniversary of the Ontario Finnish Rest Home. The association was formed in 1971 and quickly grew from the original purchase of land in 1973 next to the Fore Creek Conservation Area. Whereas first built was Sumu Estimaja, consisting of 134 independent living apartments, opening in 1976. A few short years later, in 1982, Kitalo opened, offering 111 units of assisted living apartments. The Ontario Finnish Rest Home continued to expand and meet the needs of the community and carry on the tradition of the Finnish culture. Manu Kai Koti opened in 1991, offering 63 beds with long-term care housing. UC Koti, built in 2016, offered another 85 independent living apartments. Whereas the Ontario Finnish Rest Home is home to approximately 440 residents, board members, and association members, along with 178 staff members and 300 volunteers to help keep the organization strong. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as mayor of the city of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the year 2021 as the 50th anniversary of the Ontario Finnish Rest Home Association, and encourage the citizens of Sault Ste. Marie to participate in the celebrations throughout the year.
That will take us to consent, and agenda item 6.5, cost analysis of purchasing electric vehicles, has been separated from consent as Councillor Shoemaker has proposed an amendment. But under consent, you've got all of the items save and except 6.5.
Okay, so 6.5 is removed from consent as a result of amendment forwarded by Councillor Shoemaker. We will start the consent agenda. Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have just a couple. I'm going to start in 6.3, please.
Go ahead.
I just think that this is the Canada Healthies Community Initiative grant to enhance some amenities out at Pointe-aux-Chenes Park. I think it's a great plan. I discussed on a couple of occasions with some members from the Sioux Disc Golf Association about adding a course out at Pointe-aux-Chenes, and I really appreciate Mr. Lamming and his staff working with them to hopefully bring this added amenity to the park. And I received quite a few calls after it was out in the media that they were looking to make some improvements out there. People are interested, which was good to hear, and have some ideas. As I explained to these people who reached out to me, that these amenities will make the park a lot more engaging. My question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Lamming, is on a go forward basis, Mr. Lamming, is there a bit of a plan that city staff has for the day park in terms of adding amenities or improvements, or is that something that's you plan over the course of a couple of years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. Yes, as you may remember, we did bring back the Parks and Recreation Master Plan last year, which we were going to do 3 parks per year. We look at bringing this back for this year's budget cycle as well. With respect to this space, as you stated, we had met with the Sioux Disc Golf Club a number of times, and it provided a great opportunity because we had also had a shade structure that had been part of a previous discussion along with playground equipment. The Volleyball Association had also had a need. So we thought that we combine it and activate the space, and it was very timely to allow to bring this back to meet the March 9th deadline for this grant opportunity.
Thanks, Mrs. Lyman. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else in 6.3? Councillor Bruni, Councillor Scott, and Councillor Venezuela.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Mr. Laming. If the grant money of $80,000 doesn't come through, where does this project go from there?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we go through our normal budgeting process. It would have a request through capital through the normal budget cycle for 2022.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Laming. I love this. First off, this is great. It's great to see. I do have a quick question though. So I appreciate that you've worked together with the Sioux Disc Golf Club and the Sault Ste. Marie Volleyball Association, but is there going to be any sort of other, or could there be any sort of other public input on this? I know, like Councillor Gardy, I've received quite a few calls about this area, and especially after this came out into the media. And there were a couple that inquired about tennis courts. And I think you and I actually spoke about tennis before. That was a different matter, but there were just some questions because there is a private tennis court out toward that area, and they were wondering if there was something that could be done to put in to include that. And that's why I was kind of wondering if there was still going to be some sort of public input, or if we could, if you could include that in any future reports about costs associated with it. But hopefully you can give some answers to that.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, yes, we're happy to review any matters. As you may be aware, we have the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee. So that really is the committee that where ideas are suggested and funneled through, and then they come back to council. So we'd be happy to take a look at that. Given the time frame is very tight, and we are working together with Public Works and Tourism and Community Services here, there's quite a few attributes for this request already to try to utilize the full funding that we're going forward. 80,000 is grant portion, and another 25,000 is from city contribution, 15,000 through the Parks Reserve, and then 10,000 in-kind services.
Perfect. Thank you.
So Councillor Venezuela.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming. Mr. Laming, in terms of the outcomes of this application, when I see this shade structure and the playground equipment, I'm very familiar with this fund. You know, it's really about creating, and I know with there is a different funding structure because it's for adapting spaces to COVID-19. So in terms of equitable accessibility, would the shade structure be accessible for people that are in mobile assistive devices? And what are you doing to sort of create that, benefit through the granting process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen. Yes, we've had quite a bit of experience recently with shade structures at the splash pad along the hub trail, and we'd be working together with our accessibility committee to make sure that we would follow the best practices with respect to this structure as well.
And with the playground equipment, is there going to be new equipment added, or is it just going to be an enhancement of what's already there?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen, we're planning new equipment for a relocated a spot which the one appendix had indicated. If there's anything that is still in good condition, we would look to repurpose, but most of it would be new playground equipment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is actually just a comment. So I just wanted to note that last meeting when we were dealing with the campground proposal, most of the feedback that I received was with respect to the day park. So there was there was lots of comment on how the day park is, perhaps not being maximized in its usage. And I think this is a great proposal to do that, to maximize the usage out there. And I think that there is a benefit to having more people out there to make the place more vibrant, to make it more, to help with the upkeep and the use and the vibrancy of the area. So I think I thank Mr. Lamming, I should say, for his report, and I think it's going to be a great addition. Hopefully we're successful in getting this grant. It would be a great addition to that beach out there. Thank you.
Okay, so I do have anybody else. Councillor Bruni has an additional question that's come up since he was originally asking. So he's the last person on my list here. So we'll go back to him, and then nothing else will move on. Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I apologize. I did have this written down. It's Mr. Lamming, regarding the washrooms. If we're going to enhance the park, what are we going to be doing about the washrooms there? I see there's on your budget items, washrooms are not included.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, yes, we will be bringing portable washroom toilets out to the site right now, and the existing washrooms and change room space will be open. But I think I'll defer the answer to this question over to Ms. Hamilton Beach or our Deputy CEO Girardi, if they're on the line.
Thank you.
Yes, you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Our intention is, especially dealing with the water issue that we're dealing out there with right now, we're going to proceed with bringing in porta potties. We're going to have them set up and use those for our day park.
And then they will be maintained on a daily basis, Mr. Girardi?
Certainly, they'll be maintained to the, Algoma Health standards.
Okay, I thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else in 6.3? Councillor Gardy, do you have anything else on consent?
Please, Mr. Mayor, 6.4, the Rural Economic Development Program application.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was hoping that Mr. Anderson could elaborate a bit on the application, because I think it's pretty important and it's good for the public to know about. Is that okay?
So you don't have a question here. You just want him to elaborate on it for the public?
Yeah, I'd like, and then I have a comment potentially.
Travis, are you comfortable giving a short kind of precis to the public of what this is about?
Absolutely, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. Essentially what we're doing is we're applying to the province for additional funds to help support attraction of new healthcare workers to Sault Ste. Marie. As most people are well aware, there's a large need for healthcare workers across the community through, either personal support workers, particularly prevalent right now due to COVID is mental health workers, physicians and nurses. So we're really just looking for some additional support from the province to get our message out there and hopefully attract some new healthcare professionals to the community.
Thanks, Trev. I think it's an excellent idea, and I commend you guys for pursuing it. You mentioned due to the tragic events of this year, we're as acutely aware as ever as to the importance of having a robust and I guess a comprehensive healthcare workforce. And we're also aware that we have one of the older demographics in the province. So we need to do what we can to ensure we have the healthcare professionals to take care of the people as they age. So let's hope we're successful and approved. Thanks, Mr. Anderson. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. That's it from me.
From anybody else in 6.4? Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Gardy, for asking Mr. Anderson to elaborate. I just have a short comment, which is, in my role as the chair of the Physician Recruitment Committee and working with city staff and the CAO, it's clear that we do need more healthcare professionals in our community. And I'm just really excited to see that staff were listening and a strategy and a marketing campaign is being proposed that'll help us accomplish those things and get our numbers to where we need them to be. We all know about our tremendous lifestyle and we have a lot to offer here. And it's great to see physician recruitment and the city, we're all working together to try and we know what we need and we're going out there to get it. So thanks, Travis.
Anybody else in 6.4? Before we move on, Travis, I agree with all the comments made by my colleagues. It's really good work and important work, and we appreciate the effort you're making.
Thank you.
Councilor Gardy, is that it for you?
That is it, sir.
Anybody else have items on the consent agenda? Councilor Hollingsworth and then Councilor Christian.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. The item I'm looking at is 6.2, the rebuild of the trackless tractor.
Okay,
And
go ahead.
so question to Mr. Larry Girardi. In the report, you mentioned that this tractor can help with all sorts of different public works activities, including snow. So my question is, with this rebuild, can you comment on how it may help with the snow? Is there any way that it could be similar to the hinky snow gate that we keep hearing about from constituents? Is there a way that it's involving snow, a way to better remove snow from people's driveways, just out of curiosity?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. First of all, this is the trackless machine that's used on your sidewalks. So basically what we're doing is we're taking one of our models, a 2009 model with about 6,000 hours on it that's tired, and we're bringing it in and having it, or sending it in and having it completely rebuilt, like new condition. As far as the gate is concerned, and I know we've had every year, it's kind of comical because I've been getting this probably for 14 years. This gate keeps showing up, and we've actually, believe me, when we first seen this, we thought this was a fantastic idea, and it is a good idea. The unfortunate part is when you use it within the city, and you get a big snowfall, what ends up happening is you're looking at driveways every 60 feet. And by the time you start at the beginning of the road, so take a nice long stretch of road like Hugo Street. You'd start at the beginning, the first driveway would be very happy. The second driveway, now we're starting to accumulate a lot of snow in that gate because you can only lift it up. Remember, your intervals of lifting it up and dropping it down are very short. So now you're carrying more and more snow. By the time you get maybe 10, 15 houses down the road, that person is going to end up with such a pile of snow and large snowbanks. So you've just shifted a problem from one sector to another. So and the people, like I said, at that end of the street are going to be very displeased. So we've really went through this. We actually did some attempts on trying this just with our own equipment. And just didn't have any success with it. In a rural area where you could be 500 to 1,000 feet from driveway to driveway, it would work. But we don't have issues in the rural areas because they're ditched, and we can put all the snow into ditches. So those are the reasons why we haven't entertained the gate.
Thank you. That's an excellent summary. And just one last comment, if I may.
Yep.
This is just a positive comment. A constituent wrote to me and said, would we consider doing what the city of Barrie has done and having a naming contest for our plows and tractors. It was called Plowy McPlowface, and it was done in Barrie in January. And it was a really fun contest that was created by the city. So I'm just passing on that fun suggestion. That's all, and thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on 6.2? Okay, no, Councilor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just had a quick question for Mr. Girardi. Larry, I see in your report here, one of the factors that you said that staff took into account was the half-life point for this machine. Does that mean we're about the half of the expected life of this type of trackless? Can you just give me a little more detail about how that internal process works as Public Works identifies a machine for a rebuild?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, there are several items on the trackless machine that tend to fail. And on these machines, they're center articulating and they're all run by hydraulic cylinders. That portion of the machine tends to start failing. The engine starts to get tired. And that's really why we go at this point, 12 years into the seasons of operating it. So it's not just, there are portions of the machine that are in half-life is more like the frame. Everything else in the frame is still, robust and solid, so it can all be reused. But the things that can't be are rebuilding of the center articulating. the hydraulic cylinders on it, a lot of the electronics starts to break down. So that's why we try and get them switched out at this point.
Okay, thanks very much.
You bet.
Anybody else in 6.2? Councilor Bezuel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Girardi, how much would a new trackless machine cost, and what is the approximate lifespan with a new piece of machinery like that?
Well, through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Vezuelen, it's 173,000, approximately 174,000 for a brand new machine. Now, what we're doing in this situation is we're taking one of our used ones, a 2009 model. We bring it to them. They strip it right down to the frame. They put all the new technology on it, rebuild it, and rebuild the engines and everything. And we're spending 150,000, saving that 13.5%. And we still anticipate having that machine for the same 10, 12-year period that we've had this past one that we're bringing in. So we're getting the life out of the machines. It's just that we find this is more cost effective.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anybody else on 6.2? Seeing none. Is that the extent of your matters, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yes, thank you.
Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question regarding 6.1, the GIS contract renewal.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure who to direct these at. I guess finance was listed on the report. So perhaps I could direct this to Michelle or Mr. Ver. But here's my question through you. We're looking at 35,000 a month. I'm just wondering how we came to this price. Do they explain the costing for this?
Mr. CEO, who's best to answer these questions?
I can probably start off, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. That pricing is very similar, in fact, somewhat less than the existing or pricing we had previously for this contract. It's a contract that where we and the PUC are the major customers for the contract. Contract covers, of course, the staff element of the Innovation Center, the staff that work on the GIS project, but it also covers the computer infrastructure and importantly, the specialized software licenses that are required for this program.
Okay, thank you. That clears things up a little bit. Does the PUC pay a separate fee like we do, or is the 35,000 inclusive of PUC?
The PUC pays a similar fee to what we pay.
Oh, okay. Conservation Authority, are we aware of any fees the Conservation Authority pays?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Christian, I'm not aware of any fees the Conservation Authority pays. That would be more a question for the Innovation Center.
All right, thank you. My other question is, I believe we make annual payments to the Innovation Center. I'm wondering if Michelle can confirm that and what that amount is.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, we have an annual outside agency grant that goes to the Innovation Center, and it's around $277,000 a year.
And that does not include this separate GIS fee. Is that
no,
correct?
it's separate. It's separate and distinct.
Okay, thank you. I guess my last question is, I recognize that this GIS system is the envy of this industry. Does the Innovation Center offer this service throughout Canada or North America, or is it exclusively for the use of the city of Sault Ste. Marie?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, I do understand the GIS section of the Innovation Center has other clients. However, I don't know exactly who they are. Again,
Okay.
that would be a question for the Innovation Center.
Yes, I recognize that this is an important aspect of the Innovation Center. Certainly helpful to Sault Ste. Marie. I guess I would be a little bit more comfortable, given the $500,000 spend, if we had a better understanding of the costs associated with it. I have no doubt that it's worth it, but it would be nice when we're looking at almost a $500,000 spend a year. But those are my comments and questions, Mr. Mayor. That's it for me. I have no other issues on consent.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Anybody else on 6.1? Councillor Bruni on 6.1?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question to Ms. Shell regarding the 277,000. I know years ago I brought it up that we're hoping to kind of eliminate this money at budget time, but it hasn't been. It's never been successful. So my question is, can we put this? Well, obviously it'll come to the budget for 2022. Maybe they can come and do a presentation at council regarding this money that we provide them. Because if you look at it, we're paying approximately $677,000 approximately to the Innovation Center every year. I mean, since we're using their services at $35,000 a month, do they need that 277, especially how our finances are going?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunley. Yes, you're correct. This has come up on several occasions, and I will note it for the 2022 budget to request a presentation from them regarding this amount.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else in 6.1? Seeing none. Do any other councillors have matters on consent? Seeing none, we can do the consent motion and then move to 6.5. Madam Clerk, you're on mute.
The motion by Councillors Dufour and Bruni resolved that all items under date February 22, 2021, agenda item 6 consent agenda, save and accept agenda item 6.5 be approved as recommended.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, so that brings us to 6.5. We had this accepted because Councillor Shoemaker sent in a amending resolution. So let's just open it up to the report for discussion, for questions and comments. And then once everybody's had their questions kind of answered, we can get to about the report in general. We can get to Councillor Shoemaker's amending motion. So Councillor, do we have any questions for staff on the report? We'll start with Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really don't have any questions. I just want to say that it's a very interesting report. It's very robust, and I appreciate staff's effort. I look forward to continuing down the road with this, pardon the pun. The only thing I want to suggest as we move forward with this is I'm wondering if there's any economies of scale in terms of perhaps potential purchases down the road with other like communities. Perhaps there's economies of scale in buying bulk purchases given the heavy upfront costs. But I am certainly encouraged, and I'm more than willing, I'll speak for myself here, I'm more than willing to perhaps pay a few percentage points more for full life cycle costs for these vehicles, if it means we could reduce our emissions and continue down this road towards a smaller carbon footprint. You know, we label ourselves as the alternative energy capital of North America. I think it would be important for us to aggressively pursue these new cars and vehicles. Thank you.
Councillor Darty.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I commend the report being requested by the mover and seconder, who I believe are Councillor Shoemaker and Hilsinger. I gotta tell you, I've been reading Bill Gates' new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. And it really puts the threat of climate change into in as stark as a perspective as I've seen. And but it also outlines what the world can do to avoid catastrophic impacts of climate change in the relatively, I guess you'd say, short amount of time we have to make it happen. So when the time comes, I'm going to be in favor of converting as many of our city vehicles as promptly and practically as possible to those which are zero emission into our fleet. And you know, communities around the world are stepping up, and the city of Sault Ste. Marie needs to continue to do so. So I'm in total favor of doing what we can to reduce the carbon footprint at the city and get it to zero as quickly as and practically as possible. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and obviously I've got the motion on the agenda to move forward with converting our fleet to electric, battery-powered electric vehicles on a go-forward basis. But I guess the reasoning I put that forward and more of a comment on Mr. Anderson's report than anything else, and our climate change coordinator, Emily, as well, Courtney, who I think actually drafted it. Is, you know, we're looking at a cost differential, total cost of over the lifespan of the vehicles of 4 or 5%. And to be honest, if we are not willing to put an extra few percent into this, you know, I think it shows we aren't serious about reducing our carbon footprint. So this is, in my opinion, literally the least we can do to reduce our carbon footprint. It should not be all that we can do. We should be doing more. But this is certainly an easy win, and I think it's you know, necessary to do it for the reduction of our carbon footprint, the hopefully the well-being of our planet in the years going forward.
Okay, so you raised one point there, Councillor Shoemaker. So I want to ask for clarity on that point, just for your comment. When I read the report, I agree that the delta, the percentage different over the lifespan of the vehicle isn't significant. But as I understand it, and I think council needs to get their mind around this in order to make the decision, the upfront cost is quite a bit more significant. So you might have some significant budgetary adjustments that we have to make in the near term. And I'm not averse to making those, but what I'm suggesting is like that there will be more of an upfront cost on the taxpayer, and then the savings might be long term in that the cost of the vehicle decreases with time. But I still think there might be an effect immediately on the budget. So if council does direct staff to do this, that is what staff will be doing for next year's budget, and you might see an adjustment in the 2022 budget for the purchase of vehicles. So I just ask staff, whoever's able to comment on that, so council's kind of fully apprised of that while they, you know, assess this.
Mr. Mayor, I could give some perspective from transit if you'd like.
Yeah, please. Well, that's probably where we have the most expense.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we have a drafted plan that'll be coming forth to council very shortly over the next 5 years. It will be our goal as part of the plan to convert half our fleet by the year 2026 to electric vehicles. To put it in perspective, a conventional bus, 40-foot bus right now costs around $575,000. A new electric bus is around $1 million. So there's the delta difference. The one good advantage we have at this time is the ISIP funding, which gives us 73-cent dollars. So our upfront to get into this is going to be a bigger investment, but longer term, as soon as we get in, the better. Ottawa, Edmonton, and Toronto have already gone forward. We'll be a fast follower from a smaller municipality standpoint, but we'll be a leader in that regard. So we're quite pleased to be bringing this forward, and that's where we're.
So I think Mr. Lamming, I think that the information council is going to need for its assessment tonight is not the cost of the buses, because that's more of a longer term integration. But the Councillor Shoemaker's amending motion would see us immediately, you know, convert to the smaller use vehicles. The smaller vehicles would be electrical. So if staff could give us a sense of the difference in cost there and what that will mean potentially to, you know, an immediate budget impact, so council could just make an informed decision on it. And not necessarily the buses, but our light use vehicles.
Mr. Mayor, I can respond to that. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, you know, what we're seeing roughly in terms of capital costs for light vehicles is about 100% differential between current fuel vehicles and battery electric vehicles. So, you know, on average, depending on the model, it's about 100% cost increase in terms of the capital cost. And where the true savings are found is in the reduced maintenance cost. Just to bring to everybody's attention, just in terms of Appendix B, there is a breakdown of total operating costs between gas-consuming vehicles and electric vehicles, and we're seeing roughly 11% difference. For the vast majority, the fuel vehicles are about 11% cheaper than the electric vehicles, with the exception of the Volkswagen model, which is 1% favorable towards the electric vehicles.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. Staff, Council, do we have any more? We have additional questions for staff on this. So I have Councillor Dufour, and then Councillor Bruni, and Councillor Scott, and then Councillor Hollingsworth. So Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My question, I don't know if it's for Tom or Travis, but I noticed that you guys did bring up some really important information on the effective temperature drops on battery vehicles. You were talking about how fuel cell canisters don't experience as much of a charge loss in colder temperatures. And I'm just curious, the temperatures that you guys listed, I believe, were temperature drop from around 15 degrees Celsius to 0 Celsius. And that resulted in a 40% loss of charge. Did you guys find any data for obviously deeper freezing temperatures that we tend to experience for a portion of the year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, the study that was referenced, unfortunately, was out of the US and didn't have any data that was colder than what's reported in the council report. You know, we can continue looking for additional data, maybe from Nordic countries or in Canada, to see if there's any more information available there. But at present, what we have in the report is all we were aware of.
Okay, has staff considered instead of mapping the significant loss in colder temperatures, have we considered mapping our usage by season of some of these vehicles, so that, for instance, if we did decide to electrify a certain portion of our fleet, you know, and they weren't as useful or lasting as long in the winter, we were still able to use internal combustion engines, then is that something that we would be able to map out to, again, make an informed decision, and one that was continuing to respect you know, the value of the taxpayer dollar?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, that is not something that we've currently done, but certainly something we could reach out to the various fleet managers to discuss and try to get a better sense of utilization by month or by season.
Yeah, and on that too, are there any aspects of our fleet that currently already have indoor storage? As just from what I know about batteries in deep freezing temperatures, they tend to like being parked indoors, especially at night when it gets much colder. So that might help to influence where electrification might make the most sense for our fleet.
Certainly, yeah, that'll be another item that we can assess and report back on.
Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to see some of that further information before making a final decision on the entirety of the fleet. But I really do appreciate how thorough the report was as it is. I think it gives a lot of great information. I just, I would be more comfortable seeing a little more of that kind of climate cold specific information for a place like Sault Ste. Marie. Thanks, guys.
Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question to Travis. Travis, what is classified as a light class unit vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, as I understand it, it includes you know, the bulk of our engineering fleet and So could constitute sedans, light body trucks, and passenger vans is my understanding. I can come up with I'll have to pull up a formal definition to see if it includes anything beyond that, but in terms of the study, those were the vehicles that we assessed.
So I guess the question to Mr. Lamming stated that by 2026, most of our buses will be electric. Is that correct, Mr. Lamming?
To Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the plan would call for 21 units being purchased. Of that, there'd be 10 of the conventional buses that would be electric.
We don't have any charging stations presently on city properties, do we? Does anybody, or I just throw that out there for anybody to answer?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, as far as I'm aware, and Tom and Brent, feel free to jump in if I have this wrong, but as far as I'm aware, I don't believe we have any on city property at this point.
So for a startup cost, if we start purchasing these electric vehicles, would we know what the startup cost would be to have these charging stations in place?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we do have, and included in the report on table 8, there is capital cost estimates for the charging stations, which vary quite a bit depending on the type of charging station, and it also identifies the maximum amount of eligible funding through NRCan that's currently available. So, most likely if we were looking at light vehicle charging, we'd probably be looking at a level 2 connector, which is about $4,000, upwards of $4,000 per unit. And right now, we could get max funding of up to 50% of the total cost of the project to a maximum of $5,000 per connector.
And I just need some clarification, I guess, in the report or the amendment. First of all, I just want to say I do totally agree on this resolution. I just don't know at what pace we're going to be going at it. I think that kind of worries me a little bit, that all new purchase vehicles, light class, of course, are going to be electric. Was there any thought about purchasing several vehicles and trying it out for a 1-year project to see if these vehicles can last our winters? I'm just,
yeah,
I guess.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I mean, I think we there's a variety of options, and actually this might tie back to Councillor Dufour's question as well. We know that Edmonton is actively increasing their electric vehicles. Obviously, it's a climate that is as cold, if not colder than ours, depending on the winter. So certainly we could follow up with the city of Edmonton to get some of their real-time data and understand how their fleet's been performing in the wintertime. I think staff is certainly open to a variety of different options in terms of how the rollout happens. I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're looking at viewing this from the lens of reducing our GHG emissions as a community and as a municipality. This is one of many items that we need to look at in order to reduce that footprint. So we would, I guess, regardless of the outcome, we're going to continue down that path of reducing our emissions inventory. And certainly to get back to you on the item relative to performance in the winter, we can reach out to Edmonton to see how their fleet's been doing.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. They have basically the same climate as we do. And as Councillor Dufour said, are all these vehicles stored indoors, or are they stored outdoors, et cetera, et cetera. But no, thank you very much. And I do support it. I just caution on the speed that we're going to be going into this.
Councillor Scott, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, all of my questions have been asked by Councillor Dufour. I guess if I could just ask one, maybe I'm thinking of right now, in regards to the infrastructure, would the plan be for each vehicle to have its own charger? So with every vehicle, we get one unique charger for it in case we run into a situation where we need to charge multiple vehicles at once?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, I believe that's something that we're going to have to assess with the fleet managers. I don't have enough familiarity with respect to, using the building inspection fleet. Are they utilizing every vehicle every day? If that was the case, then we'd want chargers for each vehicles. If it's infrequent use for certain vehicles, we may not need a one-for-one arrangement. So we'll have to have those conversations and report back with the proper recommendation for the charging infrastructure.
Something else actually that I just thought of that I wouldn't mind seeing as well, if we get some information back further to what Councillor Dufour was looking for, but if we could try to get, I don't know how easy it would be, but like your average range per vehicle currently. So if a vehicle's driving around and it hits, I don't know how many kilometers they hit in a day, if the range isn't equivalent to one of these vehicles in the winter, let's say, it'll be a lot more difficult to top that vehicle back up. So it's easy to stop at a gas station and fill up. Very quickly, you're back at max capacity, but it's not so easy to charge as quickly, depending on how much the range is. I doubt many of our vehicles are at that extent. I mean, maybe the winter maintenance vehicles would be, but maybe our lighter fleet probably doesn't drive around as frequently. But once again, I'm not sure. So if we could include something like that in information that's brought back, I would like to see that as well.
Mr. Mayor, would you like me to, I have a bit of perspective on that if you'd like me to add.
Yeah, sure.
Sure. Just on the charging units, 150 kilowatt unit could charge multiple buses versus a 75. So we'd come back with using the best way. We'd promote how to use the units to charge a few buses if you were to purchase a few over. And also we do store our buses inside at the bus depot just for that piece as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through your worship to, I'll start with Mr. Lamming. At the present moment, I believe we purchase our fleet, our vehicles, usually through our local car dealers. Is that correct? To support our local economy?
We don't purchase our buses locally.
Okay, but some of our fleet, correct?
Our light duty fleet, I understand that we do. Mr. Lamming, did you want to speak to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hollingsworth. Yeah, for our light duty transit inspector vehicles, we do. But for our bus fleet, we go to tender, and we've had New Flyer be the most recent. And then we also have the agreement with Metrolinx to utilize moving forward as well for bulk purchasing if we should require.
Right. And I know that we purchase some from Ottawa, our buses and so forth. If hypothetically we go towards the light vehicle, would you be open to, again, continuing dealing with our local dealers to help, again, our local economy? Since since a number of our dealers are going into electric lightweight vehicles. Mr. Lamming?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we'd follow the procurement plan. So local dealers would be able to bid in the process as per our normal procurement policy.
Okay. And a comment. I think a lot of my council colleagues have mentioned that our cold weather climate, and I know that you're going to look at Edmonton and speak with Edmonton, you and Mr. Anderson. So my question is this, Ford, as you know, has declared as a company to go fully electric. And yes, we're talking about buses, and yes, we're talking about light used vehicles and so forth, but Ford is doing a huge PR campaign right now. I would like to suggest that our staff, one member, contact Ford to see if they would donate a vehicle or a small bus, a minibus, to do a PR portion where they can get their name out and actually be a pilot and gathers further data to see how their vehicles stand up in our climate. Again, Ford is blasting newspapers, blasting social media, blasting television, well, what they're doing. So maybe they want to work with us as a community to do a PR that will benefit them and could benefit us. And that goes back to trying it for a year. Something along that line. It could be a win-win situation. That's all. Thank you.
We've got a couple councillors who have some follow-up questions. I'll just note, I think staff may know this, but the PUC has purchased I think, a small number of electric vehicles for its fleet. It might have been one or two, I don't recall off the top of my head, but they have been using to test drive, to beta, to see how it works in their organization. They have been using an electric vehicle. And I believe they probably had that last winter. So someone can give a call over there and talk to them about what they think, obviously, about this. So I have Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor Christian that have follow-up questions, and then Councillor Gardy, and then I'd like to get to the substance of Councillor Shoemaker's motion and vote on the amendment, and then we'll go to the main motion once the amendment's dealt with. So Councillor Shoemaker, Christian, then Gardy, and then we're going to go to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, either Mr. White or maybe Mr. Girardi might know, how many passenger vehicles do we replace in a given year? Are we talking like 10, 20?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, as far as Public Works is concerned, we're usually looking at, when I refer to our half-ton trucks, because anything bigger, we haven't found anything in electric, but we're usually looking at about 4 to 5 max in a year. And let me just say this too, that the previous councils have went down this path, and of course technology has changed. We did purchase a electric gas over electric vehicle. It was a 4x4 truck. Normally we would get, out of a truck 10 years, sometimes 12 years. We got 3 years out of that vehicle, and it was quite a high maintenance. Now we're hoping technology has changed, but in the half tons, it hasn't been so great. In the cars, certainly it has been, but we are actually, we have a few old cars that we acquired from other areas that we use in the summer with students, but we're trying to eliminate the cars because we really don't use them much in our fleet.
Mr. White, looks like you were going to add something there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. I would only add that historically, we tend to try and get the maximum use out of the vehicles we have. So to have a clear number each year, we probably can't give that to you. I can say that for 2021, we aren't looking at acquiring any more light duty vehicles. So for 2022, it will become a budget consideration.
Right. And thank you for that. That helps me crystallize the point that this is really an insignificant amount of money we're being asked to spend in any given year. There was a question about the charging station, the costs for that, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Anderson. There was mention in your report of the potential for generating revenue from those charging stations, was there not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to
sorry, yes, I realize it's Emily's report and you're the one reporting on it. But
yeah, I'll have to double check. When I first went through it, I didn't see that information, but I perhaps did not pick that up. But I can certainly look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, I understood and I don't have that specific provision open in front of me. I understood it to essentially be if we install the charging stations, there's the potential to earn revenue by having the public plug in and charge their their vehicles as needed. So, and can you confirm for me, Mr. Anderson, that the capital cost of installing a charging station is a one-time cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, as I understand, the capital cost for installation is a one-time cost. I can't speak to any longer-term maintenance costs or costs should the charger be damaged.
Right. All these questions to say, Mr. Mayor, that I think that we really are not talking about a significant sum of money here. I understand your question, your initial question, which was we may be looking at an upfront expense for the more expensive vehicle, but as you note, and as the report notes, over the long term of the vehicle, we're actually looking at a fairly insignificant sum of money, and any one-time capital costs will benefit our entire future fleet, which I think we can all agree will at some point be electrified. So it's not as if these charging stations will go to waste if we install them now. I think everyone can see far enough into the future to know that our fleet is going to be electrified. It's just a matter of when. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments on that.
Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You stole my thunder. My comment was going to be to reach out to the PUC. As you said, they're operating a couple of vehicles now. I go maybe even a step further. Not being fully versed in this area, it seems to me that there might be an opportunity for us to work closely with the PUC as we develop our plan, as we electrify our fleet. They may be a resource or a partner in developing the infrastructure we need as well. So I just throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Councillor Gardy.
My questions were asked and answered, Mr. Mayor. My comment is the sooner the better.
Yeah, I do agree with the general feeling that we have to do everything we can as soon as we can to start improving the contribution we're making to fighting climate change. I think I just have one question for staff before we read the amendment and vote on it. I agreed with everybody. I think we all agree it was a very good report. It was very comprehensive. It was lots of good information. It was very helpful. And when I saw Councillor Shoemaker's motion, I understood where it came from, and I thought it was reasonable. But what I was asking myself was, why didn't staff? And this would be the question, Mr. White. You can direct this to whomever you see fit. Why didn't staff in the report suggest that we start phasing in the electrification of the fleet? In the near term, starting in 2022, seeing as we don't have any 2021 purchases left. So if you didn't suggest that, is there some kind of infrastructure concern that we should be thinking about? Do we have the capacity to do this at the scale that we might need to if we tell you now to make sure all the light duty vehicles are electric? Are there any concerns that you want to make council aware of before we vote on this? And I think it would just be relevant to the decision that we're going to make. And I'd like your perspective on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council and yourself. Your question underscores our current situation where we don't have one single area in charge of our overall fleet. This may change. As council's aware, we're undergoing a fleet services review now that we will go through this year and have some recommendations come back to us. So that would be the answer as to why there wasn't a specific recommendation emanating from this report. The concern staff would have is just that council is aware that the acquisition cost of electric vehicles is higher for the initial acquisition, albeit you end up saving over the lifetime of the vehicle in operating costs, which gets it down to a much closer delta. So in what staff will be doing is in preparing the 2022 budget, we will be looking at which vehicles we will be planning to acquire. And should this amendment pass and the overall resolution, we will be seeking a certain amount of budget adjustment for that. However, as Councillor Shoemaker has pointed out, it's not likely to be a massive budget adjustment.
Yeah, and council will be able to deliberate on that at budget time. So you'll have the concrete, delta, the concrete cost increase at that time, and we would make kind of a further decision at budget time as we're always able to do. Okay, so I think we've got the information we need to discuss the amendment or vote on the amendment. Madam Clerk, can you please read the amendment then, and we'll deal with the amendment.
I'll read the main motion first to give it context. The main motion is a motion by Councillors Zoa, Allen, and Bruni. Resolved that the report of the Climate Change Coordinator dated February 22, 2021 concerning cost analysis of purchasing electrical vehicles be received as information. And the amendment proposed by Councillors Shoemaker and Hilsinger is resolved that the main motion be amended by deleting the words "as information" and inserting the words and the council direct staff to acquire battery electric vehicles for any new light class unit vehicles that are acquired for the city fleet on a go-forward basis, with continuing monitoring of options for electrification of other classes of vehicles, including the transit and public works fleet.
Hey, Council, before I call the vote on this, does anybody have any questions they need answered? Councilor Dufour?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we would just not vote on this at budget. From what I've heard from staff's presentation, it sounds like all of the continuing monitoring of options is already happening and has been happening outside of this motion. And any upfront investment would need to be approved at budget. So why would they not just bring it back to us at budget time?
Well, because the motion is here today, and it was put on this agenda. If you want to defer, if you want to move a motion to defer it to budget, you can certainly do that as council. You need a seconder for that. They would have that discussion and vote on that. Are you moving that? Would you like to move a deferral motion?
Yeah, I'd like to just discuss this at budget with all of the other supplementary items that we discuss every year. I think that's the most appropriate place to make this decision, given that it only impacts 2022.
So you would need a seconder for that, Councillor Bruni. So we're going to discuss the deferral now. So Councillor Dufour's outlined kind of the perspective that's in favor of a deferral. Does anybody want to speak against deferring the matter to the budget? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I can appreciate where Councillor Dufour is coming from. If we pass this motion tonight, I think staff will have the time to prepare a budget with revised numbers in it for electrification of the fleet on a go-forward basis. At that time, when it comes forward at budget time, the adjustments into the budget, if the council saw fit to defeat that, I think that would be the way to go about it. I hope that's not the case, obviously, but I do think that passing this motion directs staff to get those numbers to us so that they can adjust the budgets. And, you know, if we defeat it, presumably the numbers will go down in the budget next year as we're debating, or later this year as we're debating the preliminary budget. So I can understand how Councillor Dufour wants to go about it. I think deferring it will actually prevent us potentially from getting the numbers in the preliminary budget that show what the difference would be.
Okay, Councillor Gardy, you have a comment, and then
I got a comment which might need some clarity. Councillor or Mr. Anderson had referenced that there's funding available to offset the cost of the charging stations. I'm just wondering, regardless of how we move forward over the course of the next few minutes, is that a funding envelope that we could access to have that infrastructure in place, so when we're ready over the course of the next year or two to start incorporating these into our fleet, that we would have them already? Or is it something that is kind of, it's that funding source is kind of there annually for this type of infrastructure?
Mr. Anderson, do you see the deferral of this matter affecting the city's intention to access funding sources for charging stations?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, that's a question that I'll have to bring forward with NRCan. You know, we just want to make sure that we, if we were to proceed, you know, presumably in 2022, we wouldn't want to obviously leave money on the table that's available to us if we're going to move forward with that plan at that time. So I would recommend that we have a follow-up conversation with NRCan just to confirm that this would be available beyond this year. Presumably, as the feds roll out their green initiatives, one would assume that this would be available over the long term, but I just want to double check that.
Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can we defer this until the next meeting while Travis gets this information for us?
No, the motion is to defer it to budget. The motion currently in front of us, Councillor Bruni, is to defer it to budget. Okay. So that's what we're discussing. So Councillor Dufour spoke in favor, and Councillor Shoemaker spoke in opposition to it. I'll just call a vote on it. So all in favor of deferring the matter to budget, raise your hands. So I have Councillor Dufour, Councillor Scott, Councillor Bruni, and Councillor Vezo Allen that are in favor of deferring it to budget. Opposed to deferring it to budget, I have Christian, Hollingsworth, Hilsinger, Shoemaker, and Gardy that are opposed. So that motion fails. So we're back to the amendment. So we can call a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, raise your hands, please. So I have Christian, Hollingsworth, Gardy, Shoemaker, Hilsinger. So the amendment carries. Opposed to the amendment, just for the record, I have Dufour, Scott, Bruni, and Vezoal. So the amendment carries. So that's the motion as amended. So all in favor of the motion as amended. Motion as amended. I have Christian, Hollingsworth, Shoemaker, Hilsinger, Gardy, and myself. Opposed? Vezoal, and Bruni, Scott, and Dufour. So the motion carries as amended.
So that will take us to planning. 7.72 is the planning application, and the applicant is in the waiting room.
Okay, so you are you letting the applicant in, please?
Yes, he's been admitted to the meeting.
Okay, so we have Mr. McConnell here, I'm hoping. Mr. McConnell, nice to see you. Can you give us a short précis of this planning application for all the folks watching us at home?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor. This is the former PUC building on Second Line. It's there's several buildings there. This is the building that's immediately beside the new PUC building. The rezoning before council tonight is to rezone to permit Trimont Construction to relocate their business to this property. There will be very little outdoor storage, and the use of the building is basically for heavy construction equipment, which is what the PUC was using it for. The application is being recommended by staff, and Mr. Andrew Scott from Trimont Construction is on the line tonight. And Mr. Scott or I would be happy to answer any questions council may have.
Mr. Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, Mr. Scott, did you have any comments, representations you wanted to make to council in support of the application?
I don't. Everything was in the report that that I had brought up with
planning staff.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, council, do we have any questions for either Mr. McConnell or Mr. Scott? I don't see any, Madam Clerk. As I understand it, we don't have anybody else registered to speak either in favor of or in opposition to this application.
That is correct.
Okay. So for the record, we have no one else to speak to the application either in favor of it or opposition. We have no questions from city councilors. Mr. Scott, good luck with your business. I will call a vote. All in favor?
Can I read the motion?
Oh, I thought you did. Go ahead.
It's a motion by councillors Vezoal and Bernie, resolved that the report of the senior planner dated February 22, 2021 concerning rezoning application A321Z be received, and that the application to rezone the subject property from medium industrial zone to medium industrial zone with a special exception to permit a contractor's yard supporting heavy and civil engineering construction, in addition to the uses currently permitted in an M2 zone, be approved, subject to the following special provision: that there be no outdoor storage permitted upon the subject property except storage within accessory buildings or accessory use freight containers, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
All in favor?
And that is open.
Andrew, your motion, the application is approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we'll go to 7.71, which is a report from planning, but not subject to the planning hearing. With respect to removal of a site plan control designation. The motion by councillors Dufour and Bruni, resolved that the report of the senior planning technician dated February 22, 2021 concerning civic addresses 81, 85, 89, 93, 97, and 101 Ruth Street be received, and that the site plan control designation from the semi-detached lots at 81, 85, 89, 93, 97, and 101 Ruth Street be removed, and that the legal department be requested to prepare the necessary bylaw to effect the same.
Council, do we have any, well, I'll go to Mr. McConnell first. Mr. McConnell, did you want to speak to this?
Just very briefly, Your Mayor, Mr. Mayor, this is really an administrative matter. In 2018, Council rezoned the former St. Teresa's School property to permit a 25-unit apartment building. It was a very large piece of property, and the entire property was made subject to development control, which means a site plan agreement is necessary for development. The following year, the applicant, with the city's approval, severed off 6 semi-detached lots, and those properties have now been built. They are also subject to site plan control. It is not the city's practice to do that for low-density residential development. Hence, the recommendation from staff simply to remove the designation from those semi-detached properties to clear up any possible misunderstanding in the future.
So as I understand, there's nobody registered to speak. This isn't really a planning act matter where somebody's looking to speak to this in favor or opposed to it.
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
So we have no one else here to speak to it. Council, do you have any questions of Mr. McConnell? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you've opened the motion. Yeah, all in favor? Motion is carried.
Will bring us to agenda item 8.1. It's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Gardy, whereas Pointe aux Chenes Beach is the only public beach in Sault Ste. Marie city limits, and whereas for years families have gathered at Pointe aux Chenes Beach as a community gathering place, and whereas it is important that city services in all corners of the city be accessible to the entire community. And whereas in the summer months, some in the community may not be able to access the Pointe aux Chenes Beach due to its distance from the city's core and lack of services to get to the beach. Now therefore be it resolved that staff be requested to report to Council on options for an additional bus route that would run on weekends in the summer from late June to Labor Day to bring residents from one or both of the transfer hubs to the Pointe aux Chenes Beach.
Okay, so I will go to the mover seconder for this first, and then I'll start a list. So, Councilor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I noted briefly in my comments on the upgrades to Pointe aux Chenes that staff was recommending that much of the commentary that I received a couple of weeks ago when we were discussing the campground at Pointe aux Chenes was about the beach and how it could use more activity. And so we've got a report on tonight's agenda from staff trying to bolster activity in the area. I'm hoping that this report that I'm asking for them to bring back will be another way that they can bolster some activity in the area and get folks who might not otherwise have means to get out there. It is quite a ways, and get folks that might not otherwise have means to get out there, a quick, easy ride out there on municipal transit. I know that we have a pilot program in place for another year that brings families to the splash pad, brings them to the pump track. I think logically it would be an extension of that program to add Pointe aux Chenes Beach there. But obviously, that's the type of information I'm looking for from staff to see whether or not it is feasible within the funds that we've got allocated for that pilot project. So, hoping to have something back from staff on this relatively quickly, and hopeful that they'll recommend a way to get more people out to the beach. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Gardy.
Yeah, I'm happy to support this. I look forward to the information that staff will bring back to council, and I'm hopeful it will outline some way we'll be able to make this weekend bus service come to fruition in some form. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I have Councillor Hollingsworth that wants to speak to this.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think this is a really good idea. I would like to offer a friendly amendment to the mover and seconder, if I may. Councillor Shoemaker, you mentioned that you want to offer this to families, and you also mentioned that we're in a pilot, we're offering the pump track and the splash pad offered to the families. Would you consider a friendly amendment, since we're asking staff to look into this, that we would consider including Hiawatha, especially with all the great work that Mr. Anderson's doing with regards to the mountain biking trails, the hiking trails. Many families unfortunately can't get out to Hiawatha, just like many families can't get out to this wonderful beach that you're suggesting out near Point de Chene. So please, would you consider adding in Hiawatha to be looked at and considered when it's also a wonderful free family outing possibility?
Councilor Shoemaker, you can speak. I mean, it's not a friendly amendment if the mover and seconder don't determine that. The only concern I'd have is that it's a substantial deviation from the motion that was given to council. Council has motions kind of in advance so they can consider them, you know. This is if you accept it, the motion will be amended, but it's a different motion.
That, I mean, it's a great idea, to be honest, Mr. Mayor. It doesn't, I mean, I would be happy to work with Councilor Hollingsworth to put something on the next agenda. It just doesn't jive with the motion that's here in front of us, and none of the context works. It's totally different, to be honest, but great idea, and happy to work with her on it.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments on this motion? Seeing none, all in favor? It's open for voting. Motion carries. I think
item.
On 8.2, we have someone else. We have someone else as a seconder now, do we not, Madam Clerk? Councilor Nero wasn't with us tonight.
Yeah, prior to preparation of the agenda, I was advised that Councilor Christian would be the seconder.
Okay, good.
So I have a motion from Councilor Shoemaker and Christian, whereas in 2020, the Council of the City of Sault Ste. Marie waived interest and penalties on late payment of the tax installments that came due after the March 2020 lockdown measures. And whereas the province and the global economy remain gripped by the coronavirus pandemic, with expected vaccines providing hope that we may be able to emerge from the ongoing lockdowns that businesses and residents have faced in 2020 and into 2021. And whereas, as of yet, it is unclear at what point in 2021 the great majority of the population may be vaccinated, and therefore it is unclear when economic conditions may return to a normal or new normal in the community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that Council waive interest and penalties on late payment of taxes in the 2021 calendar year, with the waiver of interest and penalties expiring on December 31, 2021.
Okay. Councilor Shoemaker, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I spoke with you about this over the weekend, and we noted that it might make most sense for the expiration to be on June 30th at this time, rather than the end of the year, and then reassess come mid-year, depending on how the vaccine rollout goes. It may be that we are well into our vaccination program by mid-year, and that the threat of lockdown will fade quickly. So I would be looking just to amend my own motion to read expiring on June 30th, 2021, and to be brought back to council for consideration before that time.
Councilor Christian, you're agreeable to that?
Yes, ironic. Councilor Shoemaker and I had a brief discussion about that very fact that we look at a partial year, so I'm more than happy to do that.
Okay.
And
okay, so the motion is amended then. As a mover and seconder, you can do that. So you have then an end date of June 30th, 2021, and it'll be reconsidered then. So understanding that's the motion, council, do we have any questions on the motion?
I was going to, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just say a few comments on it.
Sure.
The lockdowns, they ended last week. There are variants around. We're not sure if we will end up back in lockdown, but we are 8 weeks into a year, and small businesses in town have been, small businesses and residents, to a great extent, have faced uncertainty over the last couple months and continue to face uncertainty. So I think last year we did the responsible thing. We, incurred some costs on behalf of residents who were facing, an uncertain prospect. And I think though it cost us a bit last year, it was the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do again this year. And I think the modification of it to June 30th is a good balancing of what we can do for our residents to make sure that, they and the small business owners who have to pay these taxes aren't penalized if they've been shut down for the last 8 weeks and have an installment coming due. I think it's next Friday. And it helps keep them on a stable footing so that hopefully they can bounce back in the later part of the year when things, let's hope, reopen, and we'll be able to face these challenges without further delay. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those are my comments.
Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I reiterate, I agree rather with what Councillor Shoemaker has said. He pointed out that we were 8 weeks in this last lockdown, but we can't lose sight of the fact that we've been in this intermittent lockdown for the last year. So although businesses may be coming back online, they're still suffering from a year of uncertainty. So I fully support the idea of this resolution.
Okay, Councillor Dufour.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It was just a question through you to Michelle. I was just curious, in preparation for the 2021 budget, did city staff alter in any way the expected budget line item for interest on these taxes in anticipation that this might happen again?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, no, we budgeted for a full year of interest and penalties on taxes. So the budget at this point is $1,215,000. And if we waive the interest and penalties, that will leave a hole in the budget.
Okay, and just to refresh our memory, what was that amount from 2020 that needed to be made up?
In 2020, it was approximately $975,000 that was a shortfall due to the waiving of interest and penalties on taxes. I should remind council as well that we do have the operating budget in 2021 also included $1.9 million that was backstopped for COVID-related items, and we are using our tax stabilization reserve, anticipating and that we have enough safe restart funding to cover those items as well.
Do you have anything else, Councillor Dufour?
I don't. If Shelley, if you don't mind, can you just repeat that last sentence for me? I didn't catch it all. So we have the safe restart funding that we still have a surplus on.
Yes. So in the 2021 operating budget, we had COVID-related expenses that were increased in the operating budget to $1.9 million. And we backstopped that with our tax stabilization reserve. And that was with the anticipation that if we had carryover phase 1 funding, or if we got additional funding from the government, that would replace the tax stabilization reserve funds that we did included for the 1.9 million.
Okay, and if passed, what would this motion? Change that calculus with that stabilization reserve?
The 1.9 million that we have already allocated, it would increase by almost $1.2 million if we went for the whole year. Going to 6 months, just rough estimate would probably be about half of that. So we're looking at somewhere between $600,000 and $700,000 in interest to June 30th that we would have to either cover through our tax stabilization reserve or potentially look at safe restart funding. But at this point, there isn't enough safe restart funding to cover the whole 1.9. Although once we're done our year end, we should have a better idea of what we will be carrying forward.
Okay, and then just as one final question, Mr. Mayor, to Michelle, is the waiver of interest and penalties on taxes an eligible expense under the safe restart funding?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions, council? So from my perspective, council, what we're doing here is we're foregoing revenue for a period of time. And, you know, we might make that revenue up in a different way. We might not. It might create a budgetary issue at the end of the year that we have to deal with. But from my perspective, I think we're foregoing revenue for a good cause. I think Councilor Shoemaker's correct to recognize that there are a number of businesses that are struggling. And, you know, we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox to help them. And we're doing our best with staff to support them. And I think we're doing an admirable job in supporting our small business community, but this is certainly one of the tools that we do have. And if it made sense to us last year to do it, I think in the current set of circumstances with what we're dealing with, it makes sense to do it. I also want to take this opportunity just to say to the community specifically that, you know, we are open, but our small businesses are still under pressure and have challenges because frankly, the public health advice is to stay home. And, you know, if you are going to go for dinner, the public health advice is to go for dinner with a person that you reside with. So not to go for dinner with, you know, a half a dozen other friends that you don't reside with. So although the businesses have been permitted to open, we're still encouraging and people are still encouraging all of us to follow public health advice to keep each other safe. And I do think that that's critical. You know, we see the variants in other communities have taken off very quickly. We see cases jump in other communities very quickly. And we have done well here in Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma. And I think one of the reasons that why we've done well is I think a majority of people are following public health advice or being very careful about what they're doing. That has an adverse effect on the revenue going around the community and our small business operators. So I certainly am supportive of helping them in any reasonable way we can, and I think this is reasonable. I appreciate Councillor Shoemaker's you know, willingness to consider the suggestion that we, you know, do this to the middle of the year and then reconsider it then. I think that might put us in a bit of a better position revenue wise, but we'll have that discussion in July if this does pass now. So without any more questions or comments, we can call the vote. It is open on your screen. I believe, Madam Clerk, you've read the motion. So all in favor? Motion is carried. So, Madam Clerk, you can read 8.3, then Councillor Gardy, before I come to you, I'm just going to speak to it just very briefly.
Sure.
The motion by Councillors Gardy and Christian, whereas wastewater-based epidemiology has been used in recent years to monitor for the presence of drugs or disease agents in communities. Across Canada and the globe, researchers are finding signs of the SARS-CoV-2 virus in community wastewater samples. These results can augment clinical testing of individuals by public health authorities and potentially serve as an early warning for a subsequent wave of illness. And whereas Ontario researchers, laboratories, wastewater facilities, and public health authorities are now participating in this important research effort known as the Ontario Wastewater Surveillance Initiative. And whereas the practice of wastewater sampling can help local public health units like Algoma Public Health identify hotspots for the virus, which can inform decisions on where and how to mobilize resources in response. And whereas advantages to participation can also include helping to optimize and allocate resources for clinical testing, target areas with defined higher risk or vulnerable populations within the sewer shed where early action may be most beneficial, identifying transmission trends and informing predictive modeling, and ultimately protecting capacity of Public Health Ontario, hospitals, and private laboratories. And whereas the community of Sault Ste. Marie should pursue every effort to keep our community safe from COVID-19 and other variants of concern by being as informed as possible and working to stay one step ahead of these viruses. Now, therefore, be it resolved that city staff approach the Public Utilities Commission and Algoma Public Health to explore their interest in partnering with the City of Sault Ste. Marie to join the Ontario Wastewater Surveillance Initiative, and if Algoma Public Health, the PUC, and City staff believe it is a viable and worthy initiative to participate in, they work towards joining the initiative as soon as possible.
So I'd like to just explain something to council here. When Councillor Gardy submitted this motion to agenda review with the support of Councillor Christian, agenda review obviously approved it for the agenda because it's here. Subsequent to that, but after the agenda was provided to all of you, so after all of you had the motion, the agenda, it came to agenda's review's attention that the city's already engaged in this work. So I think that's a positive. I think it goes to show that we're doing a lot of things that, maybe we're not, publicly kind of patting ourselves in the back for, or maybe we should do more to explain to the community what we are doing in different cases. I wasn't aware we were involved in this initiative until the CAO brought it to my attention. But we thought it was still worthwhile to have on the agenda for a couple of reasons. One, it would be good if the initiative got the support of council, and this is our opportunity to support it. And two, it gives us a chance to talk about it and let the community know that we are engaged in this work. So I'll let Councillor Gardy speak to it, and then I can let the CAO give you a bit of an update on what we're doing here. And if council's agreeable, we could kind of pass the motion in support of the work that staff's doing. Councillor Gardy?
Well, that's interesting and good to know, Mr. Mayor, that that's already underway. You pretty much said it, that throughout the pandemic we've fared relatively well, and it's through the combined efforts of all of us that we've gotten to the point that we have to protect. We've done a very good job, obviously, protecting hospital capacity on our most vulnerable. And I just thought that the participation in this wastewater surveillance initiative within the province of Ontario would be a supplementary effort or measure that we can employ to be as proactive as we could to provide additional data on the prevalence of COVID-19 and any of the other mutant variants that could be impacting our community without us necessarily knowing. So I appreciate Councillor Christian jumping on board and being a seconder. And I'll eagerly anticipate what Mr. White has to update us on. Thanks.
Mr. White?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you've noted, the resolution was brought forth to agenda review. We did discover through staff that Algoma Public Health and PUC, which manages our wastewater system under contract for us, are participating in this program, and ourselves as the owner of the infrastructure. The sampling has begun. I don't think we've received any results yet, but we've started that process. Right now, the sampling does go down to Windsor. However, there are plans in the future that it will be processed closer to home in Sudbury.
So I think, council, this is evidence of how well the city is working with Algoma Public Health and the PUC, and how well agencies in our community have come together to collaborate and work together during this crisis. I don't know if there's any further, comments or questions on this, seeing as we're actually doing it and they don't need our authority to do it. But Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if anyone can actually answer this, but it's a weird topic. You know how they're doing the testing? Are they doing it to a level that it can be pretty specifically traced back? The reason I ask is, and I don't know that anyone else shares my sentiment on this, I feel like there's privacy or ethical concerns with testing someone's wastewater, depending on how it's tested. If it's tested to an individual, you can trace it back to their home. That gets a little bit iffy ethically, but if we're mixing it together just to kind of get a gauge on the community, I feel a little bit better about that, but I'm not sure if we have the answer to those questions.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, certainly when you're sampling our wastewater, it's our wastewater system at large. So I don't believe there would be any privacy concerns, as you state, and but I can certainly double check that.
Great. No, that was the only question I had on the matter. I think it's a great idea. I think it's important, but I know it might get overlooked sometimes when it comes to privacy or even ethical concerns for that case. But no, I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just to assuage a bit of Councillor Scott's concerns, I can tell you that I believe the wastewater is tested in the way it currently is for different things, the way it's collected. So I don't think there are any privacy issues. So just to alleviate that. And I have one question for, I think, Mr. White, unless he passes it along to somebody else through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could. You had mentioned, Mr. White, that the testing is going to go off to Windsor and then possibly to Sudbury a little closer. My question to you is, does the capacity in Windsor test solely for the original COVID-19 virus, or are they testing for variants in the province, either in Hamilton or Ottawa? Could you clarify that, or could someone clarify that for me? Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. I don't have that information. I'll refer this to Mr. Elliott, who may have it.
Thank you.
Mr. Elliott?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I don't have that information either. I'm not exactly sure what the testing is done in Windsor, but I can pop back to Councillor Scott's question. The testing is done at the wastewater plants themselves, so it's downstream of everybody. There may be some testing at pump stations, but there's no privacy concerns whatsoever.
Okay, council, ready to vote on this? All in favor? Motion is carried. So, Madam Clerk, that brings us to bylaws.
Great. So there are two bylaws that are separated due to Councillor Shoemaker's conflict. I will read the motion for the consent bylaws. It's a motion by Councillors Zezo, Allen, and Bruni. Resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda under date February 22, 2021, save and accept bylaws 2021-45 and 2021-46 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And then there's a motion by Councillors Zezo, Allen, and Bruni. Resolved that bylaw 2021-45 being a bylaw to assume for public use and establishes a public lane, the lane more particularly described as pin 315410311, Eldridge subdivision, be passed in open council this 22nd day of February 2021. And I have opened that.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And then bylaw 2021-46, which was also separated because of Councillor Shoemaker's conflict. That one, I would just point out that it's being read a first and second time. So it will come back for third reading. A motion by Councillors Zezo, Allen, and Bruni. Resolved that bylaw 2021-46 being a bylaw to stop up, close, and authorize the conveyance of a lane in the Eldridge subdivision plan 1043 be read a first and second time in open council this 22nd day of February 2021, and it is open for voting.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
We have a motion to go into closed session. The motion by Councillors Hollingsworth and Bruni. Resolved that this council move into closed session to discuss one item concerning the disposition of land, one labor relations item, and one item subject to solicitor-client privilege. Further be it resolved that should the said closed session be adjourned, the council may reconvene in closed session to continue to discuss the same matter without the need for a further authorizing resolution.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And a motion by Councillors Dufour and Bruni that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Motion is carried. Good night, everybody. We'll see you in closed.